This is Jared playing Oxygen Not Included. The first thing I'm doing is reconstructing this oil well. I'm making that out of steel, and I even have a temperature gauge in there to tell it to turn off if things get too hot, but I do have a polluted water line in there that's acting as cooling. The other thing that I'm doing is returning some water to the washrooms and showers. So I was actually getting polluted water out of there to actually make that polluted water cooling line. But I'm going to have to return that water. Also realize that the Great Hall is no longer a Great Hall because that plan's dried up. I'll deal with that later time. Speaking of the Great Hall, I'm actually expanding my Great Hall in my home base. This is because I'll eventually be getting more dupes to be here. And I want to make sure that when I have more dupes here that they're all able to eat at a Great Hall. I could split this into two separate rooms, but Great Hall is one of the rooms that can actually be much larger than the washroom and barracks. So I'm actually having this just be extended rather than having a second Great Hall built. At this moment, I'm not sure, and I don't believe it actually will be a Great Hall until they reconstruct those doors on the far left. But when they do, that'll give my dupes a place to eat, give them a high morale bonus while they're in here. And then it will allow them to be highly skilled so that they can get more things done and do some of the specialized things around the base. Also have a decoration in there other than the plant, which is good just in case that plant ever goes under, though that plant I believe is 0 to 100, so that shouldn't be happening. All right, just verifying now that the doors are complete. I have a Great Hall for my dupes to be able to eat at. I'm quite lucky in this asteroid in the fact that I've got two geysers that give me cool liquids, one salt water and one polluted water. And before I get into any mechanical base cooling or the aquatune or using power in that, I decide I might as well do some natural based cooling. So what I'm going to use for a cooling line is brine, since I've got water geyser, or a brine geyser rather. And I'm going to have that as the input, or the liquid that goes through this pipeline here that I'm constructing. So I'm actually having brine being brought up from the bottom where the geyser has been dumping out brine for a while. So that will feed into this line and go into the liquid reservoir that's sitting at the top. And then the idea is I'm going to actually have that go into the cold zone, the polluted water, when it's not cool enough, or it gets too warm, that is. And then I'll just have it circle around various parts of the base that I want to keep cool. First thing that I want to keep cool is around the pumps. That is taking in the oxygen to the base, because electrolyzers are outputting hot oxygen as well as hydrogen. Not so much worried about the hydrogen, but certainly the oxygen I want to make sure is cooled off. So that is my first place that I'm going to be cooling. And I'll take this line to go through the main part of the base once other parts are starting to heat up. But my base is generally quite cool, except for the fact the electrolyzer area and the pip area, because that was in a spot that was just warm to begin with. All right, maybe we'll stop here and skip ahead for a bit. Just notice that I built a sensor going out of the liquid reservoir. That's what's going to take the temperature that goes out of that and determines whether the brine that is going around in a line should go into the cooling area for cooling off, or it should bypass it if the temperature is already cooled off. And if it does need to go down, notice I'm building some radiant pipes. So most of this line is actually just going to be granite pipes. In a few cases, such as this, I'll actually have radiant pipes to really take in the cooling when and only when it's needed. So that is going to direct it to go into that. And that's also going to allow me to warm up the polluted water that I'll be able to put through a water sieve to produce water, because you can't do that if it's under 0 degrees. Now I've got a liquid shutoff that is going to actually push the push the brine into the polluted water via the pipes, that is, for cooling off only when the proper temperature is above, let's say, 21 or 22 degrees, or whatever I choose in that sensor to be. Of course, it needs to have automation wire connected. As I mentioned, the first thing that I want to do with this brine line, this is my cooling line, is to go into electrolyzer area. So the oxygen that's being produced by these electrolyzers, notice that area is starting to get a bit warm. That's going to go through radiant pipes. That cooler brine line is going to go through that, and those pumps that are taking oxygen to the rest of the base will not be taking hot oxygen, and they'll be taking a little bit cooler oxygen with it. Okay, so what we've got going on here is I'm just choosing to, or bringing in two different lines that's going to go in and out of this area. And that's going to go into the brine line. This is going to connect to the line, just making sure that I can jump over this polluted water line that is feeding the plants, so I can't get rid of that. But this will just jump over that and go in and out of the electrolyzer area and go into this cooling zone. Now, this will continue to work as long as my polluted water zone is cool enough. It may eventually be the case where I can no longer rely on that, and I'll need a different type of cooling. But I'll worry about that in a future episode. I just realized that the joint plate here has melted. That was intended to happen. And then now I've got some liquid here that is actually preventing the steam from escaping. But a cool thing with this is I can actually let my dupes in to do some sort of maintenance if I've either forgotten to build something or if I want to expand the insides. Of course, they will have to spend very little time in there because they're in a radiation zone unless I give them the proper equipment, which I'm probably not going to do because this is a temporary location for this reactor. I will eventually be switching to what I call a full nuclear power plant on the left side. But until that is operational, this is just going to give me a little bit of Radbolts for the meantime, no longer relying on the 3 Wheezy warts I did much earlier on in the game. It's also providing a bit of power, but it's mostly a Radbolt system, and I'll turn this off. But I'm wanting to direct the Radbolts that to go out of it. And actually, if we just trace this one here, we can see the Radbolt returning to research, or material research station, so I can continue various research projects. I'm noticing a slowdown in the game, and I've played this before, and when I have relied on meat as a source, I find I get far too many critters, and I suspect that this is what's happening with a slowdown in my game. Because I have a farm that's giving me pepper bread, that is my main source of meat, and this is kind of just a backup source, barbecue meat at this point. So there is no longer a need to have an excessive amount of pips. Oh, Wheezy wart, or wart seed, why not? So yeah, what I'm doing is I'm just getting rid of them all. It means my dupes are going to take a break from doing all the other things and this may take a while. I'm not going to film the whole bit. It'll literally take 1, 2, maybe even more cycles to finally attack all this. But I'm going to get a ton of meat. I've got a lot of pepper bread and a decent amount of barbecue meat as it is, but I'm going to get a whole lot more. And nice thing with this is, well, as I mentioned, it'll speed up my game. This isn't necessarily the best strategy. Well, I mean, like I say, I'm on pepper bread right now anyways, so I don't need these guys. Getting rid of them really doesn't hurt me. I do want to make sure that I keep a number of pips alive, because I do want pips for planting wild plants, but I certainly don't need this many of them to do that, so that's why I'm attacking this. Now what's going to happen is they're probably going to come back, and that's okay. I really don't mind about that, as long as there's just a small enough amount that it's not slowing up my game. So I'm not necessarily trying to permanently get rid of every single pip, but I just want to want my game not to be sluggish. And if I were to allow this to continue, it would only get slower and slower and slower. I've been in worse cases before where I've had major slowdown on that. But anyway, if you ever experience that and you're doing a similar thing, you may want to attack your whatever critters you're relying on for food. From this point on, I'm no longer relying on new water to go into this research reactor. It's going to start recycling its own water going in. So that's going to allow me to use water for other things and make this a little bit more self-sustainable from water perspective anyways. Having one dupe, let's decide who this is going to be. Operator, they're going to go over to the inverted world to do some work. Ultimately want to produce some wild slate wheat, but they've got other projects to set up while they're there. Okay, so down to just a few pips left. And the way the game works, it appears they actually kind of are alive for a little bit of time after you attack them. So they're pretty much just going to slowly turn to meat. Over in the verdict world, one of the first things that I'm going to get the operator, the dupe that is here, I'm going to get them to start pumping some water up into some water that's available. So that'll need a pipe and some power to be able to do that. And I've got a need for water for various things. I'm going to have a cooling system. I'm going to have steam turbines on above, and I'll actually use it for cooling off some ice as well. Just making a change to this brine cooling line, realizing I didn't do it the way I had thought. So what I was doing before is I was having the temperature red, and if the temperature was, let's say, above 20 degrees, it would take it down to the cooling area, possibly getting that brine down to a 0 or something around that before it comes back up. That's not what I want it to happen. What I want to have happen instead is to have that cooling line go down before. So the idea is I'm going to take the temperature of the brine going out of the liquid reservoir, and if it is above, let's say, 20 degrees, then in that case, before brine goes into the liquid reservoir, send it to the cooling to take on some cooling before it goes back. And then slowly what will happen is the temperature will slowly go down towards 20, eventually get under 20 degrees. And when that is the case, it will stop cooling that water and only do so once that temperature goes back up to 20. Now, the nice thing about that means that I can get the brine line to be very close to the temperature that I want. The other setup was more optimal when I didn't care about how cold it was. I just wanted to get really cool. That is not what I want in my main base. My main base I want to have is a specific temperature or temperature range anyways. So I don't want it to just be as cool as possible. I want it to be around 20 degrees, but not significantly cooler. So this is an important factor and something I should have done the first time around. So there's two different ways to do it. You can do your cooling before or after, but if you care about the actual temperature to be in a specific way, then you want to have the cooling go in before the liquid reservoir and take the temperature after, as I've done now that the change has been complete. Just notice the oxygen is a tiny little bit thinner at the top, and I've got double oxygen lines, so I figured I might as well just bring that up just a little bit further so I get a little bit thicker oxygen at the top area over here, so that my dupes can breathe well in this zone. Given Hugger the ability to use the virtual planetarium, that's because Scientist is busy over here. So now I've got two dupes being able to do some advanced research, and my idea is to build a Radbolt propulsion. Eventually I want to expand a little bit in the bottom of this area. I might want to make some steam turbines above the hot magma for power. I'll also want to make it so that when my dupes just go down here to do some digging, they don't have to do it and hold their breath. So that's why I'm setting up this system. I'm going to have to be careful to make sure that there isn't two ways to get into the zone, those with the suits and those without. So I'll have to make sure doors are locked or various different pathways are closed, because I still have a teleportation system, and it's kind of an annoying place way down here. So I want my dupes to not have to go through the Atmos suit station to be teleported, because then I'll have to manually take off their Atmos suits when they go to the other world. But when they go down into the spot and don't tend to do the teleportation, then I want to make sure they're in the Atmos suit. So a little bit complicated, not too bad, but we'll see how this goes in time. Also, since I've got more stations, I'll need more suits as well. So just putting in order for more of those. And I'll need more copper to do that as well. Okay, there are problems going on with my Radbolt system here. I'm just patching up this spot here. That's completely fine. I'm losing a little bit of steam. That wasn't the issue. The issue is the temperature. Notice that the auto sweeper is taking damage. I thought maybe I didn't make that out of steel, but it is made out of steel. But the issue I'm having is it's just getting too high. I knew that it would get the steam turbines above is not going to be enough to cool this down. but too much material, enriched uranium, has made it in. I'm not sure if I have a priority value of 1 on that, so I'm not sure if one of my dupes just ran out of things to do and threw one in now that they can physically access it. I don't think that's the case. It may have just been that I've gone through too many cycles of dropping a little bit at a time of material into that. Anyway, there's nothing I can really do but let it cool off. I might actually let it bleed out some water, or some steam, so we'll get some more cooling water into this zone temporarily. But I'm also going to reroute this above the steam turbines. I'm going to have to be very careful about the amount of work that I have my dupes do around here. It's hot in that zone. That's not the issue. It's radiation. I want to be careful not to expose them to it. These two dupes are already, Chef in particular, has taken some damage. They've got lumps on their head. So I'm going to have to be very quick about this. I am what I want to have happen here. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get it. Is if I just have very minimum amount of work happen. I want to have a pressure to determine when to drop water in there, because I see that it's reaching about 200 kilograms, or was before I had broken into this zone, and that's just too much pressure for it to be able to sweat. So that's one thing I've got to worry about. The other thing is I have to make it such that it's able to turn itself off and run out of material and slowly burn out while the cooling process of the steam turbines go on. So this is going to be a bit messy. Let me do some work with that, and we'll fast forward a bit and see how I do. So operator in the inverted world has the job of filling these different little areas here with water. Ultimately, I want to freeze this. That's going to create ice, and we're going to plant some sleet wheat. Notice that some areas that don't have ice, or water rather, is actually soft enough material for sleet wheat anyways. I just need to cool it off. So only dug out spots like sand or bissolite or other materials where I wouldn't otherwise be able to plant sleet wheat, and I'll put water in those spots. So now I'm connecting a pipe to go into all those spots here, and as I mentioned, I'll fill that with water, and the freezing process will be later on, but I don't want to keep operator idle, so they'll work on this, and we'll set up a freezing system. Actually, they can't get in there, can they? But I'll just put in the pipes and dig that out. So there's two main goals. One is just to get water into these spots. The other is our cooling line, and that is going to be done on top of the base. Now that I actually can get up to the base with the atmo suits and not taking on heat, I can go through the hot magma area, and that's where the cooling station is going to be for the future cooling of this. Water is going to come from this line here. That is going from the bottom of the base. That's not going to be enough water for all these spots here, plus the cooling and everything else, but I'll switch over to an alternate source once I run out. Okay, having problems over here. I actually had to reset because one of the dupes had died in this zone from radiation. So instead of the complexity of looking at the water pressure and deciding when should water not go in, right now I'm just telling the dupe, create a spot automation wire right there out of steel. That is going to tell the machine, do not run. So if you put a single automation wire, that just means false at that location. That means it'll have to continue to run while it's got some material out of there. I'll continue to get Radbolts. It'll be quite hot, but I've got the auto sweeper deleted or destroyed, so it's not going to overheat that or waste my steel reconstructing that. In the meantime, I'm just going to allow this to do its thing. I'll just reconnect some of these pipes here. And once this finally cools off and turns off, that means, first of all, the radiation level will go way down, so I can get my dupes in here to do some things. It just doesn't make sense in my mind to do this right now with the high levels of radiation. I don't want to build the radiation suits because it's a temporary zone. I just want a quick band-aid solution to generate Radbolts and allow me to concentrate on a nuclear power plant that'll actually be able to take the heat. That simple automation wire was enough to allow me to get the Radbolt propulsion research that I needed. Now I can decide how I want to, or where I want to construct the Radbolt engine to take advantage of that. Also realized that I've got some material from the other world, so iron ore, iron, lead in particular I'd like to have access to. But it's not actually being delivered because I don't have a conveyor line out of this. And I don't need it to go very far. I'm just going to have it go right here. And then I'll start to drop off some lead, iron, and iron ore to my homeworld for use. One mistake I made was relying on a single cooling for both the farm and the top of the the small research reactor area. That was not enough. I should have had a separate cooling system for that on the far right of this. This is the rocket that I had, if you would have seen this in a previous episode, that I was using to transport hot oil from the Desolins to this world. I no longer need it because I'm relying exclusively on high velocity transport, both to send water from here to the Desolins, as well as oil from there, and even other materials such as lead, as I mentioned. So getting rid of that rocket completely. And I've noticed I do have some water in that those liquid reservoirs, so I guess I'll have some bottled water available. Whatever. The other rocket is a research rocket that is making databanks. So the dupe that is up there, I'll just take off. Wrong rocket. I'll take off their ammo suits so that they can actually breathe. Noticing a little bit of carbon dioxide build up, so I'll have to build a carbon skimmer here there probably pretty soon. That'll mean I'll need to destroy that bin. I'm also going to destroy the rocket platforms, and I'm going to move them further away because this is where I want to construct a nuclear power plant, and I want to be able to get room because that's going to be a huge thing. Okay, so I mentioned that I was building a nuclear power plant, and that is not a building in of itself. Rather, it's a design that I just call all of this, or this is the start of what's going to be what I call the nuclear power plant. Basically, a whole lot of steam turbines. I think we're going to have 9 across the top and 6 at the bottom. Anyway, you'll see that as time goes on. The other thing that I want to do is to have more atmo suits. So I'm digging out this area over here, so that I'll be able to do that. I also want to have a station for cleaning radiation, which actually I don't think I have the research for that, but I'll do the research for that. So when my dupes go out of this range, if they have the ability to use the radiation shower, they'll do so. But there'll also be more atmo suits for dupes to use. Alright, so I see this dupe here is holding their breath. I actually reconstructed a new location for the platforms. This time when the rocket lands, it's going to land there. I could actually tell it, if you can actually tell it specifically which platform you want it to land on, but because I've destroyed the other one, it has no option but to land on this particular one. I'm going to make another platform over here where I'm going to eventually construct a Radbolt engine because I'm getting a lot of waste at Radbolts. So even though this system on the right is just a temporary based system just to generate a small amount of Radbolts, it's actually not a small amount. It's a lot, which is great, but as I mentioned, they're going to waste. So what I want to have happen is create a Radbolt engine. Even if I don't construct the full rocket, if I just have the engine itself, that will start storing the Radbolts in it as power, and allow me to, when I finally want to take off in a Radbolt engine, it'll already be filled, avoiding just a bit of waste. So that's going to be constructed there. I'm not sure if I have that location right because I want to align the input to the Radbolts with the engine and also have enough stuff to be able to build it. Let me just see. So this is the Radbolt engine. If I wanted to have a full mission of sending some material, sending a trailblazer and a larger rocket, would I be able to do that? So that's some of my material. This is going to allow a dupe to land, and I cannot get a Spacefarer module. So no, I'm going to have to bring that down a little bit. I thought that might not, because the Radbolt engine is much taller than the carbon dioxide engine. So anyway, let me destroy that. I'll bring it down and we'll see what it looks like when I get it in its new location. Okay, so I measured this out. It didn't actually have to go down all that far. As as you can see, it's not a whole lot bigger than the carbon dioxide, but it is well, it is a little bit. So that's why this one has to be further down. The other research rocket on the left doesn't have the Trailblazer and the cargo with it. So as long as I can create that, this is perfect. Yep, just enough space, it seems, to be able to send my dupes on a mission. Now, where they're going to go, ultimately I just want to wait for it to load and just not wasting the Radbolts. But in the future, I suspect the location where this rocket is going to go into the high metal world that has both natural gas geyser in, I know that, but it also has iron ore and some other, or actually no, I think it's actually iron, not iron ore, which is even better, and some other metal stuff, as well as I'm going to get a lot of gold and magma from that world. So that is going to be the next location that I travel to. The other thing, just taking a note, I'm going to have to reroute the pathway with reflectors that this goes through, because I want to bypass now the rocket. So potentially taking fuel or Radbolts into that rocket as it goes to the interplanetary launcher. And that's going to take the priority over some interplanetary launcher, but I've got a lot of water in the Desolins. And eventually this rocket's going to fill up and not be taking on Radbolts anymore. Okay, so the other bit is I'm just connecting the oxygen line. Don't want to put oxygen in the new rocket yet, because I want to take advantage of the fact that it's a vacuum to build a food storage area. But I'll put in the pipes all minus just one little connection that you've seen there, and I will direct the oxygen to go into this into those rockets in time. I'll do the same thing with water line. So just notice the oxygen is not going up there. That's just because it doesn't have any inputs. So that's okay then. The Desolens has run out of Atmo suits because there weren't, so I'm actually putting in some Atmo suits here. And we're going to take this rocket over to the Desolens. Here you can see the 3 that are available have all been worn out, and I can no longer have my dupes go down there. It is time to relocate the Atmosuit station checkpoint. I'm going to put it further over here, allowing me to have a lot more Atmosuit docking stations. It's also going to give me a spot to create those showers, radiation showers, as I had mentioned. But I'll put this in line line first, so it'll have its oxygen power and all that before I actually fully make the switch. I also need to make a few more Atmosuits to put in here. So connect each one of these as well. Oxygen, I'm going to put it in this line so that they get an even amount of oxygen. Well, I say even, actually, it's not completely true. The first one on the right is going to get a little bit more, but it won't be the first one won't be completely full before the second and third one get full if I do it this way. So I'm not terribly worried about a full even distribution. Anyway, the idea is I'm going to have a ladder that's going to go up on the left, and I will have, actually, while I'm doing this, I didn't even think about this, but I might as well, definitely should at this point, have some sort of liquid dip down station for the dupes to go on after they put on their ammo suits. And the idea is they will no longer need a mechanical door and no longer be wasting some oxygen every time they open that door. So we'll put that, definitely do that once this is constructed, because this will be a little bit more permanent. I knew the one on that I built on the right would kind of be a temporary Atmosuit checkpoint station, but this one will be a little bit more permanent because I get a lot more stations than I had in the other one. I'll have a method for preventing oxygen from escaping. I'll even have some radiation showers. Over here, let's see. How are we doing? I've got one Atmosuit station, or suit, that's not going to be enough. I'll wait for my dupes to put in some more, because they're going to be loading here. More Atmosuit stations here actually probably need to generate a lot more Atmosuits for them. Okay, so here, as I mentioned, I want to have a dip down station for liquid, and I'll probably use brine for that, but as long as liquid isn't going to evaporate or freeze at the location that you're going to put it in, brine would be more than enough. Water should also be fine, because this is before my dupes actually put on their suit, they're going to be in the, those should be sort of like room temperature, temperature that's comfortable for them. But I've got tons and tons of brine, so why not to put brine in there? And it's going to allow it to freeze if it had to, though I'm hoping that's not actually going to be the case. So to do the dip down station, I'll just have this little spot constructed. Instead of siphoning the brine that's in the cooling line, I'm just going to make a connection to the actual brine at the bottom to take it up to put it into this spot. And that should be fine. Oh, what do we get as a printable gift? An Arbor Icon. Why not? I no longer rely on carbon dioxide engines so much anymore, so I've noticed a lot of carbon dioxide has built up. So there in the polymer press, it's going to actually just vent it here, and the rest of the base will vent excess carbon dioxide down in this location. And from this point on, it'll probably be Radbolt engines. Just constructing the ladder system here. I'm just going to lock this door first, and once that door is locked, I'll now have a location for my dupes to actually go down into the bottom of the base with Atmo suits. Here we can see the brine is gone into that spot. I can actually seal off the dupes so they can no longer go to the top of the base without going through the new Atmo suit checkpoint station. And of course destroy those old ones in time. I've sealed off this area from allowing any oxygen from escaping, which is great. There is actually 2 different Atmo suit checkpoint stations, which is not good, but that's easily remedied by destroying all this material. And now I'm actually getting copper back, and the ones that are on the left is made out of lead. So that just gives me a little bit of copper, which is a little bit more rare than the lead, though I do have a lot of copper, to be honest. Still filling that spot there with more brine. I'll let that build up, and I'll start the construction of a ladder that's going to allow my dupes to continue to go up in this into the actual top of the base and just destroy the remaining Atmo suit stations here. And when I have the technology available, I will replace where those Atmo suit stations are being constructed with a place to wash away some radiation, so hopefully reducing the amount of radiation sickness. Okay, so brine has filled in that location. I can destroy that vent, and once that's destroyed, how about we mop up this mess? Because every time my dupes go up in space, they're going to get their feet wet, and there's no point of having that happen to them. Okay, so mopping up is happening, and let's go somewhere else. The research reactor has ran out of its fuel, which means that we no longer have radiation. So I'm actually going to be dropping off just the right amount of material that I want the auto sweeper to put in there. It has automation right now that's disabling it, so we will not put it in there at the moment. And that's fine. I want my dupes to do some minimum amount of construction in this zone. They're going to make this out of steel. I'm going to put a temperature sensor there, basically say whether or not it should be loaded with material at this point based on its temperature. So it can actually go on and off with cooling cycles, just so that the temperature doesn't get out of control, and hopefully the auto sweeper doesn't break in the future. I want to send this rocket to the Desolens, but I've noticed a bit of carbon dioxide. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to destroy this bin, and just all the material will just go on the floor, which is fine. I'm going to put a carbon skimmer there, and it already has the piping set up so that it will actually handle the water in, polluted water out, and remove the carbon dioxide. So whoever is flying to the Desolens won't have to have this carbon dioxide for that. And the main thing that I want to transport to there is the Atmo suits you see there on the floor, but I'll wait for this carbon dioxide to be removed before sending that rocket off. I'm adding an AND gate down here, and this is going to be actually connected up to the top of the actual research reactor itself. So it's going to go through the cycle and the button for manual override down here, but in addition to that, I'll have a line that goes up, and this is going to connect to the same temperature gauge that I've built there that goes over the research reactor. And the idea is It doesn't do me any good to actually tell the research reactor to turn off for a large period of time and have lots of material accumulate such that when you finally turn it back on, too much material goes back on. You actually want to stop the auto sweeper itself from supplying material in there. So that automation wire is nearly complete. So that temperature gauge, when things get too hot, it will not only just turn off the research reactor, but it'll also turn off the sweeper at the bottom, providing or stopping more material, enriched uranium, from making its way up there. So that's going to allow it to cool off before more material goes back in. With the carbon dioxide removed and the ammo suits loaded into the rocket, I can now send this rocket towards the Desolens. And actually, the dupe that's in there while they're flying actually can generate some data banks at the same time as a bonus. So there we are. Let's begin that launch. All I need to do is make sure when they're up there, I can take off their atmo suits. Actually, that's going to give me a bonus atmo suit, because I think I've got 2 on the ground, 1 that they're wearing, so that's perfect. That's going to give me 3. I'll take that suit off and fly to the Desolens. To cap off this episode, how about we look at the first Radbolts going into our Radbolt engine. So it won't be going anywhere anytime soon, but it's nice that we're not wasting the excess Radbolts that I'm getting out of this. And I've got a modification to the actual research reactor so that it doesn't overheat anymore. In this episode, I've constructed the first Radbolt engine, at least in this playthrough, and I'm no longer wasting the Radbolts that are going out of my research reactor. Of course, when that gets full, that may still be the case in the future, but for the time being, they're not being wasted. The other thing is I made a significant change to the research reactor system so that it can actually properly cool down, and that was simply just waiting for it to cool down, putting a temperature checker in there, disabling the auto sweeper and the actual research reactor itself, such that I don't get too much material in there, so that when I want to cool it down, it doesn't take too long. Ultimately going to replace that with a nuclear power plant, but you'll see that in a future episode. The other thing is I'm taking advantage of some of the natural cooling that I have in my base from the actual cool geysers. So I got the slush geyser and the brine geyser. All right, if you want to see some of the other cool things that I do in future episodes, like, subscribe, and see you on a future episode.